As more and more begin to know, the status quo has got to go. They're bound to say yes to a man named Dr. No, a man who makes the establishment panic. Grassroots are growing way too wild, too organic.
So Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer has decided to keep senators in town next week to continue negotiations on a border deal that will unlock a massive $111 billion spending package that includes military aid for everybody. There's aid for Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan in this huge spending package that they want to pass. And the Senate's holiday recess was set to start on Friday, but Schumer is delaying that as he says negotiations are moving along. Schumer said, quote, "The Senate will return Monday. That will give negotiators from the White House, Senate Democrats, and Senate Republicans a time to work through the weekend in an effort to reach a framework agreement," end quote. So House Speaker Mike Johnson has already adjourned the House. So the House is not sticking around. They're going on their holiday recess, which is very long. I mean, December 15th through after the New Year, that's a long time off. But anyway, so that means even if the Senate does reach a deal, they're not going to be able to finalize this bill and pass it and make it law until after the new year. Johnson said the House will not wait around to receive and debate a rushed product. So Schumer vowed that there will still be a vote on the military aid package next week. He said, quote, "No matter what, members should be aware that we will vote on a supplemental proposal next week," end quote. So Republicans are looking for significant changes to immigration laws to make it harder for migrants to enter the country. And there are signs that President Biden is willing to give them what they want to secure the over $60 billion that he wants to fund the proxy war in Ukraine for another year. CBS reported that the White House indicated to Congress that it would support new immigration restrictions, including giving border officials the authority to expel migrants without processing their asylum claims, and a dramatic expansion of deportations and detentions. House passes the $886 billion National Defense Authorization Act. So the Senate passed this bill on Wednesday night, and now the House passed it on Thursday. And this is the NDAA. This is what funds the Pentagon, and it also funds some military spending in other government agencies. And it's worth $886 billion. So now it heads to President Biden's desk. He's probably going to sign it on Friday sometime. And this includes a provision to extend Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, FISA. This is a really bad thing that gives the U.S. government power to conduct mass warrantless surveillance against Americans. The way that they justify it is they say that the law is designed to target foreigners that aren't in the United States. But the way it's written is that it allows them to collect surveillance of any Americans that they interact with. And that includes, wiretapping and collecting text, emails, and things like that. And it just has been abused and abused. But they are voting to extend it. So it was due to expire at the end of this year, and this extends it to April 19th of next year. According to Thomas Massie, House representative from Kentucky, he said that the House only needed 143 votes to strip the extension out of the NDAA, but only 118 House members voted nay, including 73 Republicans and 45 Democrats. So they couldn't get 143 members of the House to vote against this. And when it comes to just the size of the NDAA, again, it's $886 billion. That's $28 billion more than last year. This is something that increases every year. And Biden's looking for the over $100 billion for all that military aid on top of this. So packed into the NDAA that's been approved by both the House and the Senate is an amendment designed to prevent any future president from withdrawing the U.S. from NATO. The legislation was a bipartisan effort led by Senators Marco Rubio and Tim Kaine, and it would prohibit the president from leaving NATO without Senate approval or an act of Congress. So Kaine said the legislation, quote, reaffirms U.S. support for this crucial alliance that is foundational for our national security. It also sends a strong message to authoritarians around the world that the free world remains united, end quote. So Kaine, Rubio, and other hawks in Congress obviously do not have to worry about President Biden trying to leave NATO, as he is such a staunch supporter of this alliance and everything that they're doing in Ukraine. I've heard Biden call the U.S. obligation to NATO sacred, multiple times. The legislation, this was likely designed with Trump in mind. Now, Trump never said he would pull out of NATO. That's not something he's saying now as he's running again. But he has been critical of the alliance. Specifically, his big thing was he wanted other members to spend more on their military, like Germany. He wanted less of the burden to be on the U.S. when so much of it is on the U.S. But when Trump was president, NATO expanded into 2 countries. Montenegro in 2017 joined NATO, and North Macedonia in 2020. So this idea that Trump, would just pull out of NATO is just not true. But, this sets the groundwork for if any future president, gets elected on a real non-interventionist platform, that the Congress would handcuff them when it comes to exiting this entangling alliance. When Washington talked about entangling alliances, it doesn't really get more entangling than NATO. Now there's 31 members with Finland joining, soon to be 32, and the U.S. is handing out war guarantees to all these countries.
Here's Gerald Salenti with today's trends in the news.
So why the market's going up? Well, the markets are going up because now the bet on the Fed street is that the Fed is going to pause interest rates and then lower them at least 75 basis points next year. And we got that 100% right, said it when no one else was saying it. They're going to do it to keep Ms. Faccia Bruta over here that you just saw, Janet Yellen, as the Treasury Secretary. They always lower interest rates in the run-up to the presidential reality show. And that's all this fucking shit show is. It's a fucking 2-bit reality show. And by the way, we own that trademark. Yep. Democrats, Crips and Bloods, a crime syndicate, murderers and thieves. Don't forget to vote. Don't forget to vote. So anyway, going back to the markets, that's what's pushing them up. More cheap money going to flow into it. Now, what's also happening, we said, when this happens, gold is going to go up. Now, gold's like trading now as we're talking about $2,040 an ounce. And each week in the Trends Journal, this is our 65th week of doing it, we have all the firings going on, people getting laid off. 65 weeks been doing this. Ready? This came out yesterday from the Messenger. More than a third of companies are expecting layoffs next year. Almost 40% of companies are forecasting layoffs in the coming year, and even more are anticipating a hiring freeze, according to a survey of 906 business leaders by Resume Builder. In the first 11 months of the year, companies have cut 686,860 jobs. You ready? 115% increase announced during the same time as last year. This is according to Challenger Gray and Christmas. This was the highest January-November job loss total since 2020. Oh, 2020? When the little fucking scumbags locked down everything? Those little arrogant boys and girls locked down everything? We're fighting the COVID war. We're fighting the COVID war. We'll tell you what to do. And the media whores sold it. Those how bad the fucking numbers are, and the economy's going up. So, speaking of bullshit, crap, and scumbags, more than 2/3 of the U.S. House of Representatives voted in favor of a defense policy bill today that includes a record $886 billion in annual military spending and authorizes policies such as aid for Ukraine, push back against China in the Indo-Pacific. Hey, don't you all care about pushing China back in the Indo-Pacific and Ukraine? The fucking country's going down the crapper, and these little fucking crapheads are stealing our fucking money to give to the military-industrial complex. Yeah, the guy, Lloyd Austin, the defense contractor, yeah, Secretary of Defense, last job with Raytheon, the second largest defense contractor in the United States. This is the shit that's going on as our country is going down the crapper because we got crapheads in charge. Look at this stupid shit! Stealing our money as the country's rotting in front of us. Ah, there's a guy. My daddy was an ambassador. My uncle was an ambassador. Army member of the club. I love every fucking war since I've been sicking off the public tit since 1994. I'm Anthony Blinken. Blinken. Go fucking fight. Go to the front lines and fight. All you scumbags that stole our money to give to the military-industrial complex. Calm down, Salenti. Biden says Israel's Gaza bombing campaign is indiscriminate, but he vows to keep supporting it. Israel's security can rest on the United States. Isn't that nice? A fucking place that was invented by the United Nations and the Balfour Declaration. But right now it goes on. The literal security of Israel as an independent Jewish state is literally at stake, but it is. We continue to provide military assistance to Israel as it goes after Hamas. military assistance as it goes after Hamas. They're bombing the fucking place into obliteration. They killed nearly 20,000 people. 70% of them women and children. Destroyed over 100,000 buildings. Stealing our money to do it. Tehran warns of an explosion if war continues. Yep. At least every week we receive a message from the U.S. telling us that the U.S. bases in Syria, Iraq are targeted by some groups, this guy said. These groups are defending the Arab and Muslim people and in Gaza. That is why they're targeting U.S. bases in Syria and Iraq. What the fuck is the United States doing in Syria and Iraq? They have no right being there. He goes on to say, we do not recognize Israel as a government. It has been an occupied power for 75 years. And European Union has lost credibility on Israel and Palestine, says Ireland's Prime Minister Leo Varadkar. He said that we've lost credibility at the global south, which actually is the most of the world because of what is perceived to be double standards. And there is some truth in that, quite frankly. Some truth is 100% true. America and its allies can kill and slaughter anybody they want for any fucking reason.
Your daily dose of liberty education starts here. The Tom Woods Show.
Thing that prompted me to invite you on here was indeed something relating to Americans for Prosperity. Now, we just found out they made an endorsement in the GOP primary of Nikki Haley. And that made me think maybe I totally misunderstood the nature of this group to begin with. So I don't really know. So can you say something, first of all, before we get into that endorsement, based on your experience in the organization, what is its true nature?
My understanding, the organization that I grew to love when I met them in 2017, they almost purely focused on state level policy and then politics in order to affect that policy, right? Because if you don't have policy champions in the legislature, you can't pass the policies that you're working for. And that was 95% of what they did. And they up till this year, that's what we did. Last year, we endorsed 47 different liberty loving candidates here in New Hampshire. We got most of them over the line. They're in the legislature now doing as much as they can, passing education freedom accounts, lowering taxes, strengthening Second Amendment rights. They're doing all kinds of awesome things. And that was like the bread and butter. That's what I understood the organization to be. So lots of really great people at the state level doing really awesome things. And so all the various state chapters are just out there, like you said, inviting you to do this awesome stuff. They're not holding back, right? They're getting crazy work done at the state level. And then this February, headquarters, our CEO, Emily Seidel, I guess I shouldn't say our anymore, but the CEO, Emily Seidel, announced that they were going to take a path forward to turn the page on the past, is the words that they used, to make sure that Donald Trump doesn't get the nomination again. And so that the country can move forward in all of that. And that was in February. And then, of course, last week you saw Americans for Prosperity Action, AFP Action, endorsed Nikki Haley. So certainly really shocking, right? Because in my view, my personal view, she was so counter to so many of the policies that we've advocated for years. A restrained foreign policy, the opposite, a fair market, a fair and free market, not cronyism and corporatism and subsidies. And, free speech is one of the key pillars of what Americans for Prosperity advocates for. And it was 2 weeks ago, she was rallying to ban anonymous speech online. Yeah. So a lot of those things, it was like, to me, I couldn't make sense of it.
In fact, even when she announced that she was running, I remember thinking, this is completely tone deaf. There is no more any market for a Nikki Haley. What could she be thinking? And then I forgot, the hangers on, the people who expect checks with their names on them in their pockets, in the various sectors like the military industrial complex or whatever. Yeah, I can imagine that those people would support her. But the idea that an Americans for Prosperity would choose her, especially when there's a Ron DeSantis there. And, even if you want to hedge your bets a little bit on foreign policy, okay, well then Ron DeSantis is probably going to be somewhere between Ron Paul and Nikki Haley. So you could always go with him. So why they wouldn't even pick him is astonishing.
Well, in the memo that came out when they announced this, right, it laid out all the numbers. It laid out the polling. Nikki Haley's in second in Iowa. Nikki Haley's in second in New Hampshire. Nikki Haley's in second in South Carolina. Okay. And yeah, let's say that let's just agree that might be the case, right? I'll take them at face value on that. For an organization that espouses principles above politics and people above politics, it didn't make sense to me that just because she has a shot, she would be the one.
Yeah.
And the trade-off being that we're picking somebody less principled that has a better shot. And I personally, I would like to see somebody that's more principled that has a little bit less of a shot. I got into this, full disclosure, in 2016, I didn't have well-formed policy positions. I didn't have a solid foundation. And I kind of, like a lot of voters in this country, kind of swayed with the breeze. I listened to Fox News and CNN, and that's kind of where I got a lot of my opinions from, right? And in 2017, when I went to, it was called Grassroots Leadership Academy. I learned so much from my classmates, from the people that worked there. They really helped me form a foundation of beliefs that I could go back to. So anytime a policy question comes up for me, or a question on what the right thing is, I can go back to that foundation. I can go back to those principles, and I can make a decision based on those. And so as the years went on, 2018, 2019, I was doing activism through AFP. I was working on other campaigns here in New Hampshire, and I started to really form my core beliefs of what I believed and what is right and what is wrong. And so when I came out and took that bold stance, I've worked jobs that I wasn't passionate about before, and I remember being miserable. And I probably could have stuck my head in the sand, done this for 7 weeks until the New Hampshire primary, gotten through it, and gotten back to what we do and what we're passionate about. But right now, just going back to that passion that drives me, the vision of the New Hampshire that I want to see, Nikki Haley doesn't fit into that picture at all. And having her in office doesn't help that mission. It hurts that mission in a lot of ways. And so that's kind of what drove it, right? I had to get back to, I had to be honest with myself, and had to be honest with other people about how deeply opposed to this I was.
Before, if this gets clipped and gets in front of other audiences there, it should be pointed out that, as around the last time I had you on the show in 2020, you were like the lone voice who stood up against those insane spending packages that were so largely responsible for the price inflation that followed. And Donald Trump was, let's say, very unfair to you at the time when he was president, and really sent his people to harass you and stuff for having the nerve to say, we should have a vote before we pass the largest spending package in human history. So right. You have a right to be.
I didn't say anything bad about Donald Trump at that time during the CARES Act, but he said, just for merely asking for a recorded vote, he called me a third-rate grandstander and said that I should be kicked out of the GOP. Now, we have since buried the hatchet, okay? He was against me in that primary. Then he was for me in my last primary. And he called me a first-rate defender of the Constitution in my last primary. So we'll see where he ends up in this primary. But the thing about it is, Dave, I don't care what people say. I'm just I'm 10 years into this congressional experiment for myself, running for office and just trying to vote my conscience for the whole 10 years. And it's worked out for me so far. I've had people against me who are no longer here in Congress. Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger Max donated to my primary opponent. And guess what? I'm here and they're not. So I just don't worry about this stuff too much.
You had proposed an amendment to not enforce car companies for the cars. What's the term I'm looking for here? A kill switch for cars. Explain this to me and my audience, because I do not understand this at all, but it scares me.
Yeah, very quickly. In 2021, as part of that big infrastructure package, the Democrats got inserted into a bill that, frankly, most of them probably didn't read, because they were disputing me in the debate on the floor of the House that this provision was even in law, and I had to read the law to them. They got a provision inserted that says by 2026, every auto manufacturer has to have an automated kill switch in the car that basically monitors your driving and determines if you're impaired, not drunk, not under the influence, but impaired. And if you're impaired, it will automatically disable your car. And so in the funding process, when we were still trying to do the 12 bills, by the way, we'd given up on the 12 bills. But when we were still doing the 12 bills, I was able to offer an amendment to defund this kill switch provision. And I thought it would sail through. I actually thought they would let it go on a voice vote. I was having to debate with my staff, should I ask for a recorded vote if they let this pass on a voice vote? And I get there, not only did they not let it pass and they asked for a recorded vote, there were over a dozen Republicans who voted against this amendment. They voted to keep the nanny state in place, to expand the nanny state, over a dozen Republicans. They actually had 2 Democrats vote with me. And okay, I hope it looks like you're sitting down. So I will tell you who one of these 2 Democrats was. It was AOC, voted to defund the kill switch amendment. And what's funny is she asked me about it, and she was concerned about civil liberties. And I said, I have exactly the same concerns. And I told her, here's who will attack you, Mothers Against Drunk Driving. So I want you to go into this knowing what you're getting into. And I said, oh, by the way, AIPAC's running $90,000 of ads in my district saying that I always vote with you. It's about time you vote with me once on a provision. So that she actually voted to defund the kill switch. I thought that was great.
Well, good for her. She should. We make fun of her when she's wrong about stuff, but she should get credit for the things she's good on. And I will also give her credit for they've the squad types might go say some things that me or you wouldn't agree with about the Israel war, but man, there is some courage it takes right now to kind of stand up against when the war drums start beating. It gets a lot of people to just kind of go along with it because, you don't want to be called all the names that you're going to get called if you oppose it. So I credit everybody up there who is at least trying to be somewhat sane during all of this.
There's a force field around Israel now, and you can't criticize them or else they'll strike it down with a congressional resolution.
Yeah, and it does. It's just it's so reminiscent of kind of the George W. Bush Republican strategy of like, if you criticize the war, then you hate America and you love terrorists or something like that. And it's all so incredibly stupid. But
yeah,
anyway,
you'd love Putin if you don't send another $60 billion to Ukraine.
Now, that's a good transition now. So what's going on with the funding to Ukraine? Because it seems like that's actually coming to an end and not going to pass before Christmas.
If it does pass, I think there's a general feeling here that maybe the last tranche of money, because support the question is there enough support to get this passed or not? If there is, there's barely support and it's withering. The statements coming even from Zelensky they're just trying to hold ground. They don't talk about retaking ground. And he really, and we need to help him, needs to start discussing some kind of diplomatic, end to this conflict. And, we've got to be realists on both sides of this. It's almost impossible to find out how many casualties have happened on both sides of this. Now, there are people in the media will be happy to tell you there have been 300,000 Russian casualties. And then you ask them how many Ukrainian casualties, and there were 100 or something. Like, it's just ridiculous. We need to end this war. Zelensky's over here. He's gone to the Senate, where I think they're more supportive in the Senate than they are in the House. So he went there because he might get booed in the House. And then he met with all the military-industrial complex yesterday as well. Had his picture with them. So he's here doing the rounds. Since the war in Afghanistan has ended, there's about a $50 billion hole in revenues per year for these companies. And so they have to generate it there in Ukraine. And now with that sort of phasing out, they want to send $14 billion to Israel. There's probably some physical equation you could write, continuity of the military industrial complex. Like all of the foreign wars we're funding sums up to about $50 billion every year, regardless of where we are.
Yeah, man. So tell me, Last Rites, the Death of American Liberty, what's it about?
Well, I was just, I had the impression there are some people out there who still try to use positive thinking about politicians. and I was just trying to cure that habit because, positive thinking about your own life, about your own capacity, about your friends, you can do that. You start thinking positive about government, pretty soon you're going to be wearing, fetters and chains and 98% tax rate and some rascal coming by and seizing your bank account. And it just it's much wiser to be cynical about people with power over you than to be blindly trusting them.
You got that right. And man, this thing is such a red pill. All your books are, feeling your pain. It's going to be brutal. It's got evil Bill Clinton on the front. And, all of them are like that. You read the thing and you're just like, oh, man. I've always sung the highest praise. My very favorite up until now has been Attention Deficit Democracy. You really make sure that when you write these things that they're masterpieces.
In the FBI chapter in the book that talks about the Bundy Ranch case and how the Justice Department and FBI lied for 3 years to keep one or two of the Bundys in jail, claiming that the FBI had not surrounded their house with snipers. And then it turned out that that they finally admitted it in the discovery process for the criminal trial. And the federal judge put her boot way up their backside and threw the case out of court.
Yep. And but on the last day there, there was almost a shootout. There's a heavily armed federal SWAT team there I'm not sure made up of which all joint task force types. And the way I remember it, with MP5s and AR-15s, and then the militia guys were standing there in one big huddle, and they had a sniper up on the bridge on the overpass as well. And the cops literally, just like Homer Simpson in The Hedge, just start walking backwards. Actually, we're going to not do this today. And that was how that ended, was they backed down to armed civilians. Just exactly how it's supposed to work. Because as you say, as the judge later admitted when she angrily threw out the whole damn case, the cops were absolutely the aggressors there in every way. And what they were doing to this guy and his family was illegal.
And folks forget that one of the big fears the FBI had at Ruby Ridge was, as the siege dragged out there, and that's after the feds had killed Vicki Weaver and after the marshals had shot Sandy Weaver in the back, that the feds were paranoid because there were more and more gun owners coming to that area, and the feds were worried about being surrounded. And Janet Reno, ex post facto, changed her justification for the final assault at Waco 2 years afterwards. She said that the biggest concern was that people would be coming to surround gun activists and supporters of the Branch Davidians would be coming to Waco and putting the feds in danger. So that's why she had to send in the tanks and gas the children.
Right. And which, of course, was a lie that somehow the Texas Rangers or the local McClellan County Sheriff's Department couldn't handle that themselves.
Absolutely. It was a scam from the get-go, and it's a very chilling sight to go there and see that simple little sign, this is a vault where the women and children were gassed.
Yeah. I know you just went there recently and wrote a piece for us at the Institute about that.
I was shocked. I was shocked and sad.
It is
Thank
something.
God for ways. I never would have found it.
Yeah, the contrast between like, here I am on a nice day out on the prairie, and geez, this is where you guys did all of that, huh? It's kind of incongruent.
There was a vibe. I was with a friend, and she said that she sensed that there were ghosts there, but she's Celtic, so she's always seeing ghosts.
Yeah. Well, anyway, yeah, Waco. Look, isn't that the thing, Jim? Is that this is the government that'll do Waco to you? I mean, that's what Bill Hicks said in his bit. He goes on about the IRS and he goes on about Waco and a few other things in Rant Minor. And he goes, look, the lesson is the state always wins, and they'll bust your house down. They'll kill you. They'll burn you. And they will always win. You lose. You're not free. And that's basically the deal.
Well, at one level, yes. On the other level, if the feds play their cards too hard, then there's going to be a backlash. I think of Congressman Jack Brooks. He was chairman of the House Judiciary Committee. In 1994, he was quoted as saying that the burning to death was too good for the Branch Davidians. And he ended up being defeated when he ran for re-election to Congress that fall. So,
well, that was good. I didn't know that part of it, that was what led to his defeat, you think?
I think it was part of it. I mean, there was just such arrogance. And there were a lot of gun rights groups and Republicans who were able to convince Americans that they would be put a leash on the federal government.
Yeah, well, we see how that worked out. It's a hell of an empire to try to wrestle with, even for the committed.
Well, that's true, but it's always fun to make jokes about it.
Well, you got that right, and this book is full of them. And that's a great selling point. I think always has been of your writing is it's pummeling of facts and information, and read it and weep, true history of our time, and yet at the same time, you let us off the hook with a good laugh every few pages too, and you do. You succeed. It's always great, and I can't tell you, Jim, how proud I am that the Institute got to publish this book, that you let us do it, that you gave us a privilege, the opportunity to put this book out.
But here's James Wilson in his State House Yard speech, October 6, 1787, probably, very possibly, the most influential Federalist arguments throughout the ratification debates. It seems like a lot of it kind of flowed from Wilson. We talk about the Federalists so much these days. I know Brian McClanahan, just like I do, talks about how the Federalist is way overblown for its influence during the ratification debates. It did not do much outside the state of New York. Even if you can say that Madison and Jefferson, for example, thought it was very important to include for students at the University of Virginia in 1825, if that doesn't mean it influenced ratification, because it really didn't. But a lot of the arguments were similar prior to when those were published. James Wilson's his speech in October of 1787 is a biggie. And here's one point that he makes, talking about the different structures between the state constitutions and the federal constitution. And this is, or the Constitution for the United States. And this is where Patrick Henry was arguing against it. Like, look, they're totally different. If we're used to constitutions being structured this way, and then now we have it the other way, how are we guaranteed that they're going to be read the same way? Maybe it'll make sense here in a moment. The leading discrimination between the state constitutions and the Constitution of the United States. When the people established the powers of legislation under their separate governments, they invested their representatives with every right and authority which they did not in explicit terms reserve. And therefore, upon every question respecting the jurisdiction of the House of Assembly, if the frame of government is silent, the jurisdiction is efficient and complete. Okay, blah, blah, blah. A lot of words there. But in delegating federal powers, another criterion was necessarily introduced, and the congressional authority is to be collected not from tacit implication, but from the positive grant expressed in the instrument of the Union. Implied powers have always been a lie, and whether you think the Federalists were being scammers or they made a mistake and not just including text like Hancock recommended, either way, the people ratified under the notion they were sold on the idea that power was expressly delegated, positive grant expressed in the instrument of the Union, and there weren't implied powers on top of it. And here's how he put it again. Hence, it is evident that in the former case, the states, everything which is not reserved is given, But in the latter, that's the federal constitution, the reverse of the proposition prevails, and everything which is not given is reserved. And I think that almost makes Patrick Henry's argument there, because he's like, if all the other constitutions are everything which is not expressly reserved, they automatically have unlimited power other than what has been carved out. And this is a new kind of a novel system. This is a novel system that everything which is not delegated is reserved. He said the distinction being recognized, this is Wilson again, will furnish an answer to those who think the omission of a Bill of Rights a defect in the proposed Constitution. For it would have been superfluous and absurd to have stipulated with a federal body of our own creation that we should enjoy those privileges of which we are not divested either by the intention or the act that has brought that body into existence. TLDR, why list stuff that they can't do, that they already can't do because it's not been delegated to them? And the whole thing would have been cleared up with a statement of delegated and reserved powers. Anyways, Noah Webster, this whole message was repeated over and over and over. I've got just a couple of brief examples so we can power through this. Noah Webster put it this way, just not even 2 full weeks after James Wilson. He said, the Constitution defines the powers of Congress, and every power not expressly delegated to that body remains in the several state legislatures. Charles Pinckney, in a speech in South Carolina, the House of Representatives, in January of 1788, said almost the same thing. The general government has no powers but what are expressly granted to it. It therefore has no power to take away the liberty of the press. People were concerned, like, well, what about the liberty of the press, trial by jury, et cetera, et cetera. And he said that invaluable blessing, which deserves all the oh man, sometimes I can't read. I can read it in my head, but people who can't pronounce things, that means they learn things from reading, I guess. The gentleman has justly bestowed upon it, I'm sorry about that, is secured by all our state constitutions. And to have mentioned it in our general constitution would perhaps furnish an argument hereafter that the general government had a right to exercise powers not expressly delegated to it. So if you start listing other stuff that they can't do, then people get confused and think, well, it's like all the other constitutions that we've had, and well, then they can also have all kinds of other powers. Tacit implication, as James Wilson put it. I'm not sure if I'm explaining that as well as I should, but doing my best here. Here's Edmund Randolph in the Virginia Ratifying Convention, June of 1788. He said, a Bill of Rights, therefore, accurately speaking, is quite useless, if not dangerous, to a republic. And that's kind of the argument that we're getting. Like, it's going to be confusing if they're not supposed to do stuff, and then we're hammering home that, no, you're really, really not supposed to do stuff. Well, why are you listing it in the first place? And I think, again, that argument has legs as long as it's clearly in the text of the Constitution that they're only authorized to do the stuff that's been delegated to them. And here's James Wilson again. This is in the Pennsylvania Ratifying Convention, November of 1787. He said, a Bill of Rights is by no means a necessary measure. In a government possessed of enumerated powers, such a measure would not only be unnecessary, but preposterous and dangerous. And he explains a little bit why, and here's a brief take. If we attempt an enumeration, everything that is not enumerated is presumed to be given. And that's where we get to, that's how Madison was kind of creative in this and putting together the 9th and the 10th Amendment, what became the 9th and the 10th Amendments. We know that he wanted the 10th Amendment to be part of a new Article 7 along with separation of powers, but the final version ended up being different. Anyways, the consequence is that an imperfect enumeration would throw all implied power into the scale of the government, and the rights of the people would be rendered incomplete. So they were concerned. Their warning was, and some of them were probably genuine, some of them maybe Hamilton was a little scammy about it, but it is an interesting argument to me. They're basically saying, like, if as soon as you start listing stuff, then people are going to start reading the document upside down. Instead of being a system of delegated and reserve powers, it's going to be they do everything other than what's carved out. And I think that's how a lot of people treat it today. So maybe there's something to that.
The first thing I want to say is, A, we are already in the emergency because the Fed exists. The Fed is the emergency. You know, this type of emergency that they're talking about is how the Fed would save themselves. They're not looking to save us. They're looking to save themselves in a financial panic. And apparently they have all the legalese ready to justify anything they want to do. That further shows us how messed up laws are. You know, it shows that law has lost virtually its meaning. And that's typical of authoritarians. They will manipulate laws and language, especially. I mean, we saw with COVID how language with vaccine, you just change what the word vaccine means. That's all done. And, you know, I like to use, there's a lot of people that don't understand that liberal, if you think of liberals today, the word liberal used to be libertarians, the exact opposite. But it was hijacked. You know, this is typical. You change the meaning of words to make it mean what you want to mean. So that's why people will say classical liberal. That means the classical liberals are the libertarians. So language is used, you know, manipulated, and laws are also used as weapons. One example that came to my mind is a company, if they charge a too high price, according to bureaucrats, they're gouging. If it's too low, it's dumping, according to bureaucrats. And if it's the same as their competitors, it's collusion. So no matter what price you have, if they want to come after you for something, they have the laws all set. And this is not what law is supposed to be about. It's totally, and that's why if the Fed has a doomsday book, they have their legal ways of doing whatever they want. And that's not what law is about. I want to close this segment by saying I found a quote, and most of us have heard it from Tacitus, and I think he was right. He said, the more corrupt the state, the more numerous the laws. And boy, is that right on.
I can't keep up how many thousands and thousands of pages. If we get new people in, we're going to shrink it, but it keeps expanding. Even when the people are trying to do it, some of them are very sincere, but the situation, the whole organization of government is so powerful and there's so much money behind it, it's not going to be very easy until the market demands that it collapse, and that will be a big problem. But over the years, most people associate me with an effort to audit the Fed because I want to know what's going on. And here they are, they're telling us the doomsday book, but it's been secret all this time. And they had to work hard to get it out, so the information leaks out. I think everybody knows that the Federal Reserve works in top secrecy. I think the Federal Reserve Board chairman and the boards are usually just front people for the people who really have the control. And those are the oligarchs we have, the people who run the military-industrial complex, the welfare state, because they have to have the money. Now, when this subject came up in the committees when I was in Congress, it was always I would point out a few of these things, and they said, well, yes, that's true, but the problem isn't the Fed. The problem is the Congress, which they have a half a truth there. It is the problem of the Congress. It's the problem of the people. People want to spend too much, so they blame the people. But then they say it's always the Congress if they wouldn't spend so much money. But of course, if we didn't have the Fed, that's readily available for financing anything and everything that the bureaucrats put in place as a favor to the people who are really running the show. And that's what's happening. They do have control, and there are some people. And if you say it's a conspiracy, people frown on that. But there are two types of conspiracies. One that's just made up out of thin air, and it's just an assumption. And the other one is a true conspiracy, where people got together and planned it. And there's a lot of good people conspiring together to bring about liberty. There are other people get together and conspiring, how are we going to spread our effort of cultural Marxism? So they're doing that all the time. But when I would bring the subject up to a Federal Reserve Board chairman and say that, what's the matter with about the audit? We need to know about this. And they would hem and haw and say a few decent things, pretending they're all for it. But then they would always go back to one word, no matter which chairman it was. They always said, we have to be careful, though, because we have to have independence of the Federal Reserve. We don't need a lot of people, lobbyists and congressmen and other people knowing what's going on. So they want independence away from this sinister influence. But my argument always with that, and I warn people, I say, anytime the Fed say they want independence, substitute the word secrecy, because that's what their goal is, but they'll never be able to keep it secret. As time goes on, it'll become more apparent, and the markets help tell us that, and they'll let us know as much as anything, even though the people who want to maintain this system, unfortunately, right now they're in control of the justice system and the police department, the people that want to come in and use the guns to enforce the system that we have. But conditions are getting rockier, and it'll be more necessary than ever that we know what the Fed has in store for us under what's generally outlined in the Doomsday Book. But it shouldn't be that complicated. It should be that we follow the Constitution, have honest money, and have decent people there, and a monetary system that does not allow counterfeiting.
Liberty is available. The people just need to want it, and they have to see the benefits of it. And hopefully we help provide those benefits.
I don't have the optimism of saying, one more election or two, and we're going to have control of the Congress, and we're going to reverse all this. I don't think that's going to happen. I think what will happen is people will realize the difference, and we will see a day when we will have our way and we'll be able to express ourselves for the cause of liberty. Please come back to the Liberty Report soon.